Ali Moore with you. It is our Legal Talkback segment. David Whiting joins us. Melbourne solicitor David Whiting, good morning.
Good morning, Ali.
Extraordinary news in terms of it being truly momentous. The High Court's just delivered its judgment and they've overturned the conviction.
So, yes, I mean, I'm like probably half the lawyers in the country looking at the High Court website, but I can tell you that it's not available to us mere mortals just yet.
Yes, no.
So,
how long do you think it will be until the full judgment and the reasons are given?
Oh, within the hour.
Within the hour?
Within the hour, there's a website called Austli, AUSTLII.edu.au, and I would expect that the High Court judgment will be there within the hour. There's also access to it from the High Court website, but as you can imagine, they are the website is getting far more traffic today than it normally does.
So what does it mean that the conviction's been overturned? Does it mean that George Pell now walks out of jail?
Well, it depends. Normally you get a redirection. Normally the High Court could send it back to a judge to have another trial on the same factual issues, or they could direct an acquittal. And the problem is that all we know is what the answer is. We don't know how they got there.
Right.
And we don't know what orders they're putting in place. So it could simply be that he walks today, or it could be that he's sent for a retrial. And in which case the question will then be, so the sentence is, or the conviction's overturned. In the event that there is to be a retrial, then he would be in a position where he'd be able to apply for bail again.
So there will be directions that we are yet to hear about that will tell us what the next step is.
Yes, we know the first line, we don't know the rest of it. So
okay,
yes.
And we will, of course, bring the rest of it to our audience as soon as we have it, and we'll also hopefully cross to our legal reporter once they've managed to digest this information as well. Gosh, David, it was very, I felt we'd moved into the world of future technology, the fact that we could get a High Court judgment via Twitter, but of course it always lets us down one way or another. There's only so much that you can tell on social media.
Yes, well, I don't think it's going to be 3 lines. I think it's going to be, 100 pages. Who knows?
1300 222 774 is the number if you'd like to pose a question to David. But David, before we get going on that, you've got a couple of thoughts about Qantas.
Well, I was fascinated with an article that appeared on the ABC News website on the 27th of March, and its headline was, Qantas denied sick leave to its grounded workers amid the coronavirus pandemic. So you get to thinking, well, somebody's being stood down. What if they're on sick leave and they're now stood down? Are they entitled to what would otherwise be their sick leave entitlement? And Qantas was of the view of, well, no, they're not. And it struck me that seemed a little strange, so I thought that I'd go off and do some research.
And before you've gone off, before you tell us what you found, I'm going to clarify, because I now have a fuller picture from ABC News. This decision does not only grant the application for special leave, but also acquits Cardinal George Pell, and he will now be released from prison. So that is the next step in unrolling this judgment. But I'm sorry to interrupt you, David. I thought that was just important to make that fine. Point. But now let's go back to Qantas.
Okay, so Qantas. So my question is: are you entitled to sick leave during a period when you were being stood down? And the answer is there's a minor confusion in the Fair Work Act that somebody will presumably work out. So an employee is not taken to be stood down if the employee is taking paid or unpaid leave that is authorised by the employer or otherwise authorised to be absent. So the question will be holiday pay is annual leave, is leave that is authorised by the employer. You apply, you get approval, you take the leave. So the question is personal leave, carers leave, leave that for which you get an authorisation from the employer? And the answer would be no. So the argument then becomes well, perhaps the legislation, if you meet the criteria that you are, if the employee meets the notice and evidence requirements, then that's the authorisation. So My view is there'll be any number of employers who will be looking to take advantage of that.
Can the government plug that hole?
Oh, yeah, they can. They could make it very clear that personal and carers leave is leave that's available to be taken during a period such as this.
There's so many. I mean, we've been talking this morning, David, about the JobKeeper payment, and of course, once that legislation hits Parliament, we'll have a better idea. But there are just so many different scenarios, so many different jobs, so many different employment relationships that it's never. The devil is really in the detail, isn't it?
Oh yeah, yes. And I saw it working particularly well for someone in a retail environment who buys and then sells, because a large portion of the turnover of the business is in goods that are acquired for resale. But there are lots and lots of businesses where the salary component is a significantly higher proportion. So a restaurant, for example, a law firm, for example, we effectively resell labour. So at that point, a drop of 30% in turnover is in fact a very significant drop, because I'm not buying in any goods to on-sell.
We have been joined by David Whiting. He will take your calls, 1300 222 774. And just to reiterate the news headlines, the Cardinal George Pell will be released from prison. The High Court has acquitted him, and he's served 1 year of his maximum 6-year sentence, and he will now walk free. 1300 222 774 is the number. Pauline has joined us from Strathmore. Hi, Pauline.
Hi. Hello, David.
Hello,
My
Pauline.
problem is getting money back from a big travel company on cancellation. We sent an email to a suburban office to cancel 7 items. We were verbally told that 2 hotels had refunded without penalty. But when we asked to receive money, we were told the financial department of the company had taken over all refunds and told that it would be in a safe trust account for refunds. I'm wondering now if the refunds that we get from different companies will ever reach us. My credit card insurance...
My view is that they will if the refunds... Did you pay by credit card?
No, I paid by cash. Oh, and
Okay.
The other person paid by credit card.
Because there are sometimes opportunities where you can dispute the transaction on the basis that the service is not going to be provided. If you pay by credit card, you can take it up with your credit card provider. There are time limits on that, and they're fairly tight, but that's something you could look at. My expectation is that the people who actually pay the refund, so if the hotel pays it back, I would expect that your travel agent will pass it back to you. But you get this frustration from time to time. You buy an airline ticket and they take the money from you within seconds. For some reason, you'll cancel and you're entitled to a refund, and the refund takes weeks.
Yes. We even paid a little extra to a European tour company for an insurance against cancellation. But that could take 4 months to get through.
Well, that could take months and months, and remember that most travel insurance policies don't cover pandemics.
Yes. Pauline.
So you need to have a look at the terms of the policy.
We wish you well, Pauline. Melody's joined us from Mount Eliza. Hi, Melody.
Hi, how are you going?
Good, thanks.
Good.
So my question is about the right to protest, the loss of our civil liberties, and also what recompense we can get as landlords for what I see as the seizure of our property rights.
Which one do you want to deal with first, Melody?
Right to protest and the loss of civil liberties, please, David.
Well, I suppose the question would be, I mean, you don't have any absolute right to do anything. Everything needs to be qualified by the fact that you live in a community, and we need to be mindful of the rights of other people in the community. Your ability to stand in the middle of the road protest needs to be measured against the fact that people have the right to drive along the road you want to stand in the middle of. So everything is relative and nothing is absolute. It's really a question of whether you consider that the arrangements that are currently in place are excessive.
David, I'm going to pause this conversation now because we have been joined by Sarah Farnsworth, who's the ABC News reporter covering this High Court decision this morning. Sarah Farnsworth, welcome. Thank you for talking to us again. This was unanimous.
Yes, according to the High Court, the full bench of the court, that's 7 justices, the highest judges in Australia have unanimously agreed that any jury acting rationally ought to entertain a doubt as to George Pell's guilt. Now, that came after the Court of Appeal upheld the convictions, but today, now those 5 convictions have been quashed by the High Court, and George Pell will be free to leave Barwon Prison, where he's currently incarcerated, sometime today.
And how much detail do we know about how they've come to this conclusion?
It's only just come through. We're still trying to digest it, but I can read the beginning of the judgment, which was, today the High Court granted special leave to appeal against the decision of the Court of Appeal and unanimously allowed the appeal. The High Court found that the jury, acting rationally on the whole of the evidence, ought to have entertained a doubt as to the applicant, George Pell's guilt, with respect to each of the offences for which he was convicted.
So this is it. This is final. There will be no more.
They have ordered that the convictions be quashed and that the verdicts of acquittal be entered in their place. So George Pell will leave prison today a free man. He is no longer convicted of child sex abuse. And
Sarah Farnsworth, we know that this has been obviously very different conditions for the High Court because of the situation that we're currently in. Has there been any reaction around the High Court today, or simply too early?
Too early to say. We can tell you that the High Court website seemed to have crashed because I think a lot of people were trying to access their judgment all at the same time. We are waiting for them to tweet as they said that they would. I'm not too sure if that's come through, but we'll be able to tell you a little bit more about this case as it unfolds throughout the day.
Absolutely. Sarah, thank you. I appreciate you talking to us. Of course, Sarah Farnsworth and everybody else who's watching this judgment now has a legal judgment to read. It's not something that you can quickly run across and report. You do want to make sure that you are accurate with everything that you are saying. So we'll bring you more detail as we get it, as people are able to digest that information from the High Court of Australia, which has this morning overturned the 2018 conviction of Cardinal George Pell. We are with David Whiting this morning. We're taking your legal calls. Sorry, David, for this jumping to and fro, but really it is a momentous decision, as we've been saying, and there'll be plenty more that we'll hear about it through the course of the day. And people do need to, this is not something that you need to get wrong on air, is it?
No, but I can add a little on the basis I was having a look at a couple of things while we were talking there, and that is that there were a series of what the court calls opportunity witnesses. And it was uncontroverted evidence from people as to George Pell's practice of greeting congregants near the church steps after Mass, the historic church practice that required the applicant always be accompanied when robed, and the continuous traffic in and out of the pre-sacristy for 10 to 15 minutes after conclusion of Mass. The court held that on the assumption that the jury had assessed the complainant's evidence as thoroughly credible and reliable, the evidence of the opportunity witnesses nonetheless required the jury acting rationally to have entertained a reasonable doubt as to the applicant's guilt in relation to the offences. So the answer would be, if you weigh up the uncontroverted and unchallenged opportunity evidence against the evidence of the complainant, which is accepted as being thoroughly credible and reliable, the jury had to have had a reasonable doubt.
And that, of course, is what it is all about. David Whiting, thank you. And as I said, we will get more analysis as well from ABC News through the course of the day. Let's continue with our legal calls. Lots of people who have got questions for David Whiting. Rod in Gembrook. Hi, Rod.
Oh, hello. On a will, if there's a spelling mistake in a surname, how critical is that?
The spelling mistake is not critical at all. If it was David Brown versus David Smith, then I wouldn't call that a spelling mistake. What you need to do is think of the names as providing the identity of the person that the will maker intended to benefit. And if it's a spelling mistake and there is no disagreement as to who was intended to benefit, that's the end of the discussion.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Very good, Rod.
Yes. So Smith versus Smythe, don't worry about it. Unless there is a Smythe who might be, or a Smith for that matter, who might well be a substitute beneficiary. If there's no confusion, there's no problem.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Rod, thank you. Good to have a simple one. Peter in Ballarat. Hi, Peter.
Good morning. My problem is with tow truck operators. Are they regulated, and if so, by whom? I had an experience recently where I paid the cost of towing 2 cars from a crash site within 30 kilometres of the depot of the operators. One was $300 cost, the other was $600 cost.
They are regulated, they're regulated by Vic Roads as the primary starting point, and there's a difference as to whether it's an accident tow or a trade tow.
It was accident.
Then there is a scale of fees.
Right. Vic Roads would have that.
Vic Roads would be your starting point, yes.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Good luck, Peter. Michael in Triganina. Hi, Michael.
Hi. G'day, David. How you going? I listen every
very
week.
well.
It's a great series. I'll make it quick because there's other calls. I met a woman at speed dating about a month ago. We've only been on one date just before the lockdown. She lives in Geelong with her parents. For obvious reasons, she doesn't want me to go to her house yet. We're going to do a second date. I want to drive down on Monday with my bike, meet her on the Moolap bike track that goes to Queenscliff on her bike. Is that... I don't want to get the $1,652 fine for unnecessary travel like the learner got yesterday. I have rang the police, but they're a bit vague, and I don't want to risk a fine. And the second thing is, if we do meet up, can we ride down and get takeaway and eat it?
I'm actually looking at the stay-at-home regulations as we speak, because I felt really confident there would be a question on this.
I've read them as well. They're confusing.
Sorry, Pat?
I've read them as well. Mine fits in a few categories. Exercise, meeting a partner you don't live with, but it's...
Well, the real question, my starting point is this person now your partner? Right? So I wonder, in terms of those regulations, whether the threshold even gets met. So...
By the threshold, I understand the word, but...
Well, we've created this space, if you like, for people who are partners but who do not live together. And we're coming along and saying, well, we don't have a difficulty if partners get together.
Well,
so the question then becomes...
We've been out once.
Well, then I would have come along and said we're not relying on the partner exemption. You're also not... She's living with her family, so she's not living alone. The more I think about this, Peter, I actually wonder whether buying a coffee at a takeaway coffee shop constitutes necessary goods and services. I've got a coffee shop near where I live, and they're doing a roaring trade for people who come and get a coffee and go home and drink it. But is it necessary goods and services?
Gosh, David, there's so many sort of intricacies to this, isn't there? And I know that we all just have to practice common sense. I had understood that if you were out exercising and you picked up a coffee, that was okay. But as you say, does it really come under necessary goods and services?
Well, you may exercise and take reasonable restrictions on gatherings. So it doesn't say... I would have thought that based on my reading of the leaving premises for exercise, the answer would be there are only two there. A person may leave premises to exercise but must apply with the restrictions on gatherings and take reasonable steps to maintain a distance of 1.5 metres. But it doesn't prevent a person from walking or with another person or persons for the purpose of exercise. It doesn't say riding a bike.
No, but arguably riding a bike would have to be exercise.
Yes, it would. And presumably if you're 1.5 metres apart, then you're riding on your own.
There you go. Errol in Waterways. Hi, Errol.
Oh, hello, Ali. Hello, David.
Hi, Errol.
David, just a quick one. I had 3 airline tickets, international ones, with an Australian-based airline that has both a domestic airline and an international airline.
Good, you've covered them both. That's perfect. Yep.
But the 3 tickets were booked online and paid for online.
Yes.
The flight was supposed to depart Melbourne on the 27th of March, but of course, the flight didn't ever take off not due to my option, but due to the option of the airline itself.
Yes.
Right? Now, the airline is merely offering me a credit, and that's not suitable according to me. I think these guys have crossed the boundary of consumer law, and I was seeking your advice. I think I'm entitled.
No, I would have said, Errol, they're offering you. They would prefer that you took a credit, because that way they've still got the use of your money. But if the service was cancelled, you're entitled to a refund.
Okay, that's what I thought. Because it may not suit us in the future.
Oh, no, and then the question will be, well, now what credit value do I get for it? So if the service is not provided, you're entitled to a refund.
Errol, thank you. Diane in Point Cook. Hi, Diane.
Good morning. David, my question is in relation to a power of attorney. Way back in 1998, my husband and I executed short-form powers of attorney, appointing our daughter to be our attorney. Now, they were validly witnessed. Since that time, we have changed address. Our daughter has married and also changed address. Are those powers still valid, please?
They are, but you've got to persuade the other person, the person who wants to rely on them, that we're talking about the same people.
I understand. Mm-hmm.
So each time they've changed the rules in relation to powers of attorney, they put in what they call grandfathering clauses, so that if you made one under the previous legislation, it's still valid according to its terms.
Right.
So yes, it's still a valid power of attorney, but if you were to turn up at my office and ask to use it, or your daughter turned up to my office, there'd be quite a few hoops you'd need to go through to prove that we're talking all the same people.
Yeah, I understand that. I have a brochure from the Public Trustees Office which has a pro forma of the current power of attorney, and from that I understand that the attorney has to also be present when it's executed.
No.
Now, in this social distancing, that's a bit difficult.
No, they don't need to be. Their signature needs to be witnessed, but the witness for the attorney's signature doesn't need to be the witness for you and your husband's signatures.
Right. Oh, okay. That's a great help. Thank you very much indeed.
Glad to be of assistance.
David, I should say that Michael's getting a lot of pushback here from our audience, people saying that really he shouldn't be going that far. It's not necessary and quite likely not legal under the current rules.
I think you're right.
And he should stay home. Stop trying to find loopholes is the message from many in our audience. Here's just a quick final one from Pam in Heidelberg. Interesting question. Hi, Pam.
Good morning. Well, thank you very much for taking my call. I just want to query about safety deposit boxes held at a local bank. I was there recently going through some papers in my box, and I mentioned to the teller, if anything happens to my husband and I, what happens to all this, please? Who can access it? And I was told that no, unless other members of my family came down and gave 100 points and became signatories, but children were unable to come, that will just sit in the bank forever. Is that correct?
Okay. If you were to die... if someone had... Let's take it a step at a time. Had a power of attorney, somebody could come down and be properly authorised and could access it. If you were to die without it being opened, the practice is that the executor turns up with a copy of the will and evidence of your death, and then the box would be opened in the presence of a bank officer. The inventory of its contents would be taken, and then it would be given back to the bank until a grant of probate was obtained.
Oh, right. So once all those procedures are followed and probate is granted, then it comes back to the estate without anybody having to travel interstate to come and sign for it or anything like that.
Yep.
Uh-huh. Okay, no worries.
Thank you.
And Michelle in Lara, you've got another question about what we can do, but one that I would imagine goes to essential services.
Yeah, I want to know, I've looked through the Victorian Government website, and but it does not say that I can take my cat to the vet if it's sick, and I don't want a police officer to use his discretion to turn me around if, because I would consider that essential.
Vets are essential services, aren't they?
Well, I would have thought, vets are still essential services, and your answer would be a person may leave the premises in the following circumstances for emergency purposes.
Okay.
Right, so I have a crisis, I need to go to the vet, you're okay.
Okay, they just don't make that very clear.
No, Michelle, if you need to take the cat, if it needs treatment, and it can't wait, then I think you're okay, especially if you've got the cat in the front seat.
And if people are interested, Ali, what you look at is at the stay at home directions, and they're on the Department of Health website and the Government Gazette website, and they make interesting reading.
They do make interesting reading, but but it's not always easy. There's lots of things that are not clear. I've got someone who needs to transit through South Australia, and that is not entirely clear, and I've been given some interesting information from various authorities about how that should be done, because of course South Australia has a 2-week quarantine, but what if you're just coming in and going out? So it's anyway, none of it is of course it's, as we keep saying,
you're in difficult times.
It's exactly, and no one can have an answer to absolutely everything. We just have to exercise our common sense. David Whiting, thank you. Stay well.
Thank you, Ali.
David Whiting there, Melbourne solicitor, taking your calls. Of course, he will be back here doing exactly the same next week, hopefully, even though it's Easter Tuesday. I'm sure David will be kind enough to join us.